Canada has some really harsh COVID rules, but the math does not justify it. COVID is associated with 5% of Canadian deaths, 61% of them are in the over 80 age group. Cardiovascular failure and cancer between them cause over 53% of Canadian deaths. For some reason these causes are not something the Government of Canada seems to be particularly concerned with. Strangely, the government focus on escalating COVID restrictions was not challenged by the courts, not challenged by the constitutional experts, nor by the liberal intellectuals who were so caught up in defending each other's rights, and so busy protecting people from the terrors of being misgendered, that they somehow missed the greatest evisceration of established human rights in history. Instead, it was down to the simple honesty of Canadian truckers to demonstrate the power of the people to the Government of Canada. So, let's have a look at the math. The Canadian COVID numbers are tiny, with a mortality rate of 0.00043. Most Canadian COVID deaths are in the over 80s, who have an annual mortality rate of 4.9%. Even in the over 80s group, the expected mortality rate with COVID is 0.006. Just over 0.5% of the over 80s have died with COVID. Even in this highest risk group then, 88% of those who died, did so without any COVID association. Perhaps the government narrative is that there is a low death rate in Canada because of the efficiency of the restrictions. The severe restrictions prevent COVID getting out of control, like it supposedly did in the UK. In the UK the average age of death with COVID is 82.5. Which is better than the life expectancy in the UK. There's a problem here, because a population can't simultaneously be being killed prematurely by a pandemic and have a normal life expectancy. You have to live 2,100 years before you become likely to die of COVID, even using the inflated dead with COVID count. Due to the lack of vaccines, Africa should have been devastated by COVID, except it clearly was not. An alternate hypothesis is that COVID is a disease that specifically kills the elderly and the infirm. This is a harsh truth but hardly a revelation, so does everything else. You should care for the elderly and the infirm, but locking them in their homes and denying them access to loved ones or regular medical care is not a way to do it. You can't campaign about transgender rights whilst obliterating the human rights of every citizen. That would make you a devious fool. Mandated health measures are immoral, and are the time-proven route to otherization and fascism. The UN Charter for Human Rights is directly contradicted by the government's actions in Canada. So is the Nuremberg ruling, the Helsinki Accord and all other measures of a civilized society. If you take the time to think about it, all of these things are obvious. Remember, it was not the politicians or lawyers or pseudo-intellectuals who defended Canada in its time of need. It was down to the simple honesty of truckers to bring the message home. Be kind to each other. FTS.